Please proceed. I've just signed an executive order that will activate the new Department of Energy on October the 1st. The creation of a Department of Energy is an important step toward dealing with our energy problems. It will give a clear direction and focus to our energy future by providing the framework for carrying out a comprehensive and balanced national energy plan. This will help the public and the private sectors as they work together to bring energy supply and demand back into balance, both now and in the years ahead. I wish Jim Schlesinger and all those who will be working with him the best of luck in the difficult job they face.
It was a very interesting time for those of us who were there. There were no rules, so we had to make our own way and figure out what people needed and try to come up with it.
It was a very exciting place and time because everything was new. We were on the fly coming up with new surveys, new processes, new models. And we had a lot of it was almost like you heard the NASA expression, can do. Well, we had those kind of people here at EIA then.
All of us were personally experiencing the same thing, the gas lines and the rapidly escalating prices. And, you know, the feeling that somehow we could try and do something about it was really energizing. And believe me, many long hours put in by people. I mean, literally all-nighters, because we felt like we had a job to do.
Energy information and data have always been crucial for the nation's economy, particularly when the energy markets began to be deregulated in the early 1980s.
Decontrol unleashed the competitive powers of the marketplace and gave us more supply, more conservation, and lower prices.
Probably the major tenet of our national energy policy is to allow markets to work. We really rely on markets to sort of balance the supply and demand of products. And what that means is that the markets, to be really efficient, need EIA's data.
There is magic in the free marketplace, and it works.
For 30 years, EIA has been committed to the collection, the analysis, and interpretation of trustworthy energy data.
The first consumption survey that started was the residential one. That was actually an outgrowth of things that happened before EIA and the Department of Energy were formed. The consumption surveys have always been major input into our modeling efforts. So they provide the historical background used to drive in many ways the NEMS models.
Yeah, it's a trite saying that, you know, good policy comes from good analysis, but good analysis has to be grounded in good data. And you have to get the first step right.
Modeling depends on sort of three different aspects. One, it depends on the data that's available. Two, it depends on the issues that have to be addressed. And three, it depends on our understanding of the energy market we're trying to represent.
If all we wanted to do was projections, you could get away with a much simpler model. When you come in with some of the, let's look at the impact of tightening the sulfur content of, you know, diesel fuel, you need a very detailed model to try and address that.
In the end of the 1980s, EIA played a key role in the establishment of the Clean Air Act of 1990. EIA worked with the Environmental Protection Agency and members on the Hill to try and understand what the impact of different allowance schemes would have.
To take the framework that Congress gave us and implement regulations within 5 years from 1990 to 1995, we relied fundamentally on a lot of EIA data collected on the generation rates and in particular the heat input.
NEMS over the years has been a critical tool that we've used for the analysis of a host of complex policy initiatives.
When the nations of the world meet in December in Kyoto, Japan, we must be prepared to commit to realistic and binding goals on our emissions of greenhouse gases.
In addition, EIA modeling efforts are focused on projections of short, long-term, and international energy markets.
But it's very helpful to actually have an independent voice within the administration that actually can say, this is what we think is going to happen. We don't have a dog in this fight, but at the same time, we believe we have the best information available.
Since its inception, EIA has been called upon to provide reliable information to policymakers and market participants during times of international crises.
At my direction, elements of the 82nd Airborne Division, as well as key units of the United States Air Force, are arriving today to take up defensive positions in Saudi Arabia.
Things happened very quickly here. People got together, did a lot of analysis very quickly of the situation and the previous oil disruptions, and then started putting out an energy situation analysis report, which came out every day. You have to remember it was a period before the internet and those kind of things where you had information readily available. So EIA it was critical that we were getting that stuff out.
The only question for us is, at what time do we respond and how do we respond when the disruption becomes severe enough that we need to prepare an assessment? And usually we get guidance from that from the Secretary of Congress.
Domestic crises are no different. For example, when Hurricanes Rita and Katrina crippled the nation's oil and gas production infrastructure, EIA responded with timely information about the status of supplies.
Hurricane Katrina hit on a Sunday. By Monday, we were talking to the International Energy Agency about the possibility that we might have to institute a response measures, add oil to the market. And IEA was looking to EIA to tell them what can we expect in the Gulf.
EIA data is essential because it's the analytical basis for the current market and the forward market, both the short, the medium, and the longer term. And if you're in the industry or if you're in government, that information and the way it's put together and the way it's presented is absolutely essential.
The markets have changed, the players have changed, the rules have changed, and the data has changed and become more important.
The market does seem to react sometimes quite robustly with respect to the information that we put out.
Everybody on Wall Street is very keen to try to figure out what's going to happen next week or next year. Without having a good database of information to start with, it's hopeless. It's hard enough as it is, but it would be hopeless without the data from the EIA.
I think it's important that you have people who are passionate about what they really get involved in what they're doing. Not everybody has to be that way. Some people have to be sort of dispassionate and they just crank out numbers, but other people have to be able to kind of have a real sense that this is part of their life. And I think that's helped EIA in the past.
People are going to have more and more concern about energy and how they are going to be able to use it and what they're going to have to pay for it. And EIA is going to have to respond to that.
EIA will have to leverage technology to keep pace with our customers.
Climate issues are very important right now. I think they're going to be important for the next few years, but we always have to be looking ahead and thinking, what might the next major topics be?
There's a lot more that we can do to improve our delivery of the data, to make it more flexible, more accessible, more available for customers to use when they want it, how they want it.
I think actually some of the feelings that we experienced during the 70s, I see in parts of the DOE organization now.
It took a number of years for everybody in the government to agree that EIA's data was the energy data, because when we first started, energy data was being produced all over town. And so it took, I would say, 4 or 5 years finally for that agreement to be reached. And then everybody else over time stopped collecting the data. And everybody really does use EIA data. Now sometimes they refer to us as the Department of Energy, but we like to be called EIA.